Start with the Come Holy Spirit prayer. So we begin in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Read it together.
Come, Holy Spirit, fill the hearts of your faithful, and kindle in them the fire of your love. Send forth your Spirit, and they shall be created, and you shall renew the face of the earth. O God, who by the light of the Holy Spirit did instruct the hearts of the faithful, grant that by the same Holy Spirit we may be truly wise and ever enjoy his consolations. Through Christ our Lord. Amen.
So this is the rite of Christian marriage, and so I'm going to read one of the readings from the marriage rite. A reading from the letter of St. Paul to the Ephesians. Brothers and sisters, live in love as Christ loved us and handed himself over for us. Husbands, love your wives, even as Christ loved the church and handed himself over for her to sanctify her, cleansing her by the bath of water with the word, that he might present to himself the church in splendor, without spot or wrinkle or any such thing, that she might be holy and without blemish. So also husbands should love their wives as their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself. For no one hates his own flesh, but rather nourishes and cherishes it, even as Christ does the church, because we are members of his body. For this reason, a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. This is a great mystery, but I speak in reference to Christ and the church. And in concluding our prayer, this is one of the collects for the Mass. O God, who consecrated the bond of marriage by so great a mystery, that in the wedding covenant you foreshadow the sacrament of Christ and his church. Grant, we pray, to these your servants, that what they receive in faith they may live out in deeds. Through our Lord Jesus Christ, your Son, who lives and reigns with you in the unity of the Holy Spirit, one God, forever and ever. Amen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
So today we're going to be speaking on the topic of marriage and the family, and our intent is to focus on the document Gaudium et Spes, which means the joy and the hope, and talk about the state of marriage today and what do we do about it.
Guess who? We thought, why not start with our kindergarten pictures, the time when we first met 41 years ago. Not only did we meet, urban legend, that would be our mothers, claim that I pushed Kevin under the desk and kissed him. I can either confirm or deny this, but who has an urban legend? That's the one that we have to share. So we thought that would be a fun way to start. All right, so we want to just kind of we haven't met all of you, just take a little bit of an informal poll, just by show of hand. Is anyone in here a newlywed, like been married a year or less? Oh, congratulations. What about 2 to 5 years? Okay. 6 to 10 years? Thank you. 11 to 20 years? Ooh. Okay. 21 to 30 years? More hands are going up. 31 to 40 years? Oh my goodness. 41 or more? Is anyone more than 50 years? Okay, what about those someone who might be divorced. Someone who maybe had a child outside of marriage. Someone who lives with a significant other that's not a spouse. Someone who no longer attends Mass. Okay. Just as I suspected. So, you're not alone. Kevin and I raised our hand to all 5 questions, and by the number of hands I saw, none of us is immune to these factors. But there's hope, and my prayer is that you leave here today with a better understanding of the marriage vocation, the importance of family, and maybe ideas to either enhance your own marriage, if applicable, or ways to support other married couples on their journey. So I found this book, this quote from a recent book I read. It's called Spousal Prayer, and it's by Deacon James Keating. It's actually over there. It's teeny tiny, but it's beautiful. So I'm going to read the quote. Ultimately, God wants you to fall in love with your spouse in the manner that he loves you, out of sheer gift and in wonder over the beauty of who you are. So for me, that was the very first sentence of the very first chapter of the book, and it really set the tone in terms of thinking of spousal prayer as a way to marital happiness. So, just wanted to get us started on that. Now Kevin's going to share a little bit more about us.
So as Justin told you, I'm Deacon Kevin and this is Kristen. I was ordained a permanent deacon in May, and thank you for all of you being there. We've been married for 22 years. We were both raised in Albers. Have been to school together since kindergarten. We did go to different high schools. I was raised Catholic and I went to Modern Day. Kristen was from a strong Methodist family, and so she went to the United Methodist Church in New Dayton. Her grandfather was actually a Methodist minister, so a very strong Methodist family. We have 3 children, 25, 23, and 21. And so we've been married 22 years, but have a 25-year-old, a 23-year-old, and a 21-year-old. So oftentimes that gets people's heads scratching. Sometimes we let people off the hook and tell them our story, and sometimes we don't. It's kind of our own little thing that we do between ourselves. But since we trust all of you, I think, Kristen and I have adopted 3 children. Early in our marriage, Kristen hadn't yet converted to Catholicism, so we're kind of going to different churches and different parishes, some Methodist, some Catholic, trying to find our way. At the time, we were living in St. Louis. At the time, we were on the fringes of the church, but not very active. At the time, we were contracepting. We weren't really following the church's teaching. I went to Catholic high school. I'm sure I was told at some point about the pill and why we shouldn't use it, but I really wasn't convicted in that in any certain way. And with Kristen being Methodist at the time, there was really no teaching against that. That was perfectly fine as far as her teaching and Christian teaching in her church. So using the pill, doing our thing, living in St. Louis. Kristen, about 3 years into her marriage, decided that she wanted to go through RCIA. And through RCIA, we became a lot more knowledgeable about faith. Through that whole process, our consciences were being formed about the teaching and the beauty of the teaching of the Catholic Church, especially on its teaching when it comes to life and contraception and children. And Kristen decided at the time, with me in tow, to explore natural family planning. In St. Louis, there was some resources. I know in the Diocese of Belleville, sometimes you have to search for those a little bit more, but even in St. Louis, we had to do that, but we ended up going to St. Mary's at SSM for natural family planning training. Kristen, like all things she does, was a rock star. She was a super charter. We were using the Creighton model of natural family planning. It wasn't too long into that process that we figured out that things weren't working. Kristen wasn't getting pregnant, and we had all the charts down, so it was a very educated discussion with her OBGYN at the time because we had all the records. And so natural family planning for us was a real blessing. And we found out that natural children for us were not going to happen. And we very quickly, although it took a long time, we quickly knew what our options were and weren't based on our conscience and how those being formed by the teachings of the church. And so we decided that we were going to adopt. We were young enough and naive enough to, and we didn't have any money, and so we were going to adopt through the state. And so we became licensed foster children, and licensed foster parents. And as we were going through the process, we found out that the real need for children adoption were older children. So quite a few of the couples were there because they wanted to adopt a baby. That's ultimately what our decision was early on when we first got into it. That's what we thought we were there for. As we went through the process, we were challenged or called, whatever it might be, to adopt older children. And so naively, we said, well, we're young and college educated, and we have at least a little bit of things going for us. We could handle it, right? And so we became foster parents, and Liz, our daughter, came to live with us when she was 9. And so Liz is now 25 and is a mom. She lives in Decatur and has two children. About a year later, we had the phone rang again. We had a brother and a sister, half-brother and sister from Champaign, Illinois, that needed a home. And so, their parental rights were already signed away. They needed to be adopted. Their foster parents at the time didn't feel like that they could take them as their own children. And so they came into our house, got introduced to Liz, and kind of the rest is history. So I talk about this to talk about a little bit about vocation and the vocation of marriage. And primarily in the context of, our vocations as young people aren't always what we think they're going to be, are never what they think they're going to be. As a young couple dating and engaged, we had ideas and dreams and plans of what our family was going to look like. And all that changed. But that's the vocation of marriage, and that's how things work. And all of you can tell a story, maybe not exactly like ours, but a similar story. Whether it's a story of change in vocation of jobs, or change in vocation in your marital status, or change in vocation of parenting. Very rarely do we end up where we think we're going to be as young people. And so, so I want that kind of in our minds as we talk about one of the things that we want to talk about with you here today is, how do we prepare young couples, or how do we prepare people that have been married for just a few years in their vocation of marriage? How do we prepare them for the ups and downs that they're going to experience and all the different challenges? All of you are here because you're leaders, and you will be leaders no matter what your vocation ends up being after into My Vineyard's over. But I think we all have responsibilities as parents, but also as a Christian community to support our young couples. And so that's really one of the things that we want to talk about today.
So, as Kevin mentioned, throughout this diaconate formation, I guess we've been introduced to the topic of marriage. Perhaps that's a calling from God, I'm not sure. But we have been presenting at Pre-Cana for the past 5 years. We recently gave a talk at a marriage retreat, and Kevin helped to facilitate that. But honestly, like, my parents have been married for 52 years. Kevin's parents were married for 23 years before his father passed away. We've had really good role models, and we've been grounded in our faith and foundation, because I can just tell you that raising our children was the hardest thing in the world that I have ever done. And I'm almost going to cry, so I'm just going to keep going. But we also, with 3 adult children now, we are not immune to the raising of the hand that we did in that poll earlier this morning. Cohabitation, pregnancy before marriage, trials of an early marriage, and not even going to mass. I mean, to be honest with you, besides the divorce, our kids just, I raised my hand because of them. So, but it's not me. There are ways. Did that change? So as Kevin said, our intent is to share the nobility of marriage and family in the context of the Pastoral Constitution, Gaudium et Spes, which translates to the joy and hope in English. And that part I don't know languages, but the joy and the hope is so beautiful. So I'm going to reference it as the joy and hope. And we'll be covering what the church teaches on marriage and family, the state of marriage in the U.S. right now, and what we can do about it as a community. So we will be referencing the Joy and the Hope, Gaudium et Spes, the Pastoral Constitution throughout by different paragraphs. But as a writer and a communicator, I'm always, I love to be working from the same definition, because there's 1,000 definitions out there these days. So, church reference is the Catholic Church. Fostering is the applicable definition would be to promote the growth of development, to further or encourage. Nobility, and this one is the word that I honestly had to look up, is about exalted moral excellence. And I really think that that's what we are talking about today. Marriage, this is from the Catechism of the Catholic Church, the matrimonial covenant by which a man and a woman establish between themselves a partnership of the whole of life. And then family is your traditional father, mother, children, and all members and all ways that makes up family. And here's a quote. Can you read that? Yeah. Okay. This is from St. John Paul II. They came to understand that marriage and family are a true vocation from God himself, and is an apostolate, the apostolate of the laity.
So Gaudium et Spes, at the very beginning of the document, in this chapter, states problems of special urgency. And so this document was promulgated by Pope Paul VI on December 7th, 1965. Problems of special urgency in the church regarding marriage and family in 1965. So what was especially urgent in 1965 with marriage and family? You know, as somebody in their 40s, I kind of look at the 50s and early 60s as kind of the golden age of marriage and family. At least that's what I see on television. But even then, the church fathers were speaking about problems of special urgency. So was this document prophetic? Were they looking forward? Were they seeing the signs of the times? You know, free love, different things coming. So the problems, are they especially urgent now? I think that's the thing that, you know, I think if we reflect on what our state of marriage and family life may be, whether in the culture or even in our own communities, I think they are especially urgent now. And I think we all have a role to play in that. So Gaudium et Spes in paragraph 47 says that the well-being of the individual person and the human and Christian society is intimately linked with the healthy condition of that community produced by marriage and family. The well-being of the individual and Christian society are intimately linked to marriage and the family. Do you believe that? So, if the well-being is linked to it, are we well? Do you think we're well? Okay. So what are some of the roadblocks to this wellness? So some of the things that Gaudium et Spes talks about, some of the roadblocks, but also some that we added, polygamy, divorce, free love, self-love, worship of pleasure, infidelity, contraception, abortion, cohabitation, pornography, same-sex marriage. Can you think of others? Secularism. Yeah, very good. Addiction. Very much so. Very much so. Relativism. Yeah, just live any old way you want. Right, yeah. What's that? Somebody over here had one.
Oh, we said consumerism.
Consumerism, yes, very much so. Social media, technology, right, we'll talk a little bit about that. Amy? Lack of faith. Right. I'm sure we could go on and on, but we're going to talk about hope and joy. The Gaudium et Spes talks about in paragraph 48, God himself is the author of matrimony, endowed as it is with various benefits and purposes. Various benefits and purposes. So who was the first married couple? Adam and Eve, right. So Adam and Eve were the first married couple. God created them. God created marriage. And the Bible says that they were suitable partners. Eve came from Adam's rib, and we hear, especially in the marriage rite, in some of the readings, the two were of one flesh. And they walked in easy relationship with God in the garden. They walked in easy relationship with God in the garden until the fall. How did they fall short? This married couple, an easy relationship with God. How did they fall short?
Turned away from God.
Sin. What's that?
They turned away from God.
Turned away from God. They turned away from God. Instead of being focused on God, both individually and collectively as a married couple, they turned away and were tempted and sinned. And I think that's got some relevance for our couples as well, for our own marriages, but also for young couples that we may be speaking with or talking to. That our marriages can have problems when we turn away from God. And so one of the things that I like to talk with our young couples that are going through marriage prep or pre-Cana with is that it's important that both of them look as a couple towards God. That God will be their strength, God will bring grace into their marriage, that they individually need to have a prayer life, but as a couple, as one flesh, they both need to look towards God. So do we as married couples, or do we as leaders in the church teach our young married couples to look to God together? Or is our focus on something else? It can be easy, I can tell you it can be easy from somebody that sat down with couples in marriage prep to spend most of the time talking about the day. That's what the bride wants to talk about. The groom kind of, the engaged couple kind of sits there, but you have to take that conversation in a different direction because they want to talk about the day and you want to talk about marriage and what it means to be married in the sacrament of marriage. So Gaudium et Spes says, by their very nature, the institute of marriage, matrimony itself, and conjugal love were ordained for the procreation and education of children, and find in them their ultimate crown. Their ultimate crown. Children are the supreme gift of marriage and contribute greatly to the good of the parents themselves. How? Teaching humility. Yes. Selflessness. Unconditional love. Patience. Forgiveness. Respect. Different ways to express love.
Everyone is different. They're all going to
Right. Acceptance. Yeah, acceptance. So all those things sounded to me a lot like Christian virtue. The raising of children, the ultimate crown, helps us to grow in virtue. It's not that it's always going to be happy or easy. I mean, you don't have to be parents very long to realize that. All right? So there are 7 Christian virtues, and I think we probably covered almost all of them. And if you think about it, all of these virtues come into play. All of them, as parents, would grow in all these virtues. Sometimes more, sometimes less. So we talk about prudence, which is the care and moderation of money. Our justice, which is being fair and equal with each other. And so our children probably don't think we're very just. You know, you're not being fair, you know, but it does teach us justice. Temperance, moderation of needed things and abstinence from things which are not needed. Certainly as young parents, we all learn that lesson. What do we need and what can we get by without? Courage, never giving up. Faith, belief in God, belief in the good, belief in right things. Hope, taking a positive future view that good will prevail. And charity, concern for and active helping of others. So in the most recent document that Pope Francis wrote, Amoris Laetitia, I know it's got some bad press on chapter 8, but he talks about marriage being a school of virtue. It's a virtue-making machine. And so it is. It's not an easy school. Sometimes you have scars from the school, yet it is school. And so the Catechism goes on in that same vein saying that true married love and the whole structure of family life, which results from it, without diminishment of the other ends of marriage, are directed to the disposing the spouses to cooperate valiantly with the love of the Creator and Savior, who through them will increase and enrich his family from day to day. So marriage is modeled on Jesus. That's what paragraph 48 continues. Modeled on Jesus. Jesus as the bridegroom. Jesus, the Savior of men and the spouse of the church, comes into the lives of married Christians through the sacrament of matrimony. So this is an icon of Jesus, the bridegroom. I was surprised when I saw it. It's an image of Jesus in his passion, as he's dressed in a scarlet garment by the Roman centurions, a crown of thorns on his head, his hands bound, and a reed for a scepter. That's the image of Christ the bridegroom. So I think there's some, when I went and looked at the reading of this icon, one of the things I learned in diaconate formation, one of our instructor's wives was an iconographer. She wrote icons. So when they basically paint these icons, they're called writing icons. You're writing them, you don't paint them. Interesting. And when you look at them, you're reading them like writing. So it's an interesting way of looking at it. It tells a story, and that's how what the person that makes the icon wants. And so the icon of Jesus the bridegroom. The crown is a symbol of Christian marriage in the Orthodox Church. And the ropes binding Christ's hands are a new universal symbol of marriage. The reed used as a mock scepter is a symbol of humility, of a person that does all possible to bend in service to others. So that's one reading of the icon. Another reading is, the icon, Christ the bridegroom, portrays the selfless love of Christ for his bride, the church. He is dressed in royal colors as a betrothed king, corresponding with sacred scripture's account of his mockery by the Roman guards before his crucifixion. The crown is a symbol of his marriage to the church. The rope, a symbol of bondage to sin, death, and corruption, which Jesus united by his death on the cross. The reed, a symbol of his humanity. So Jesus is a bridegroom. So what did he teach us with his love for the church? What did he do? He taught, he accompanied, he walked with sinners, he forgave, he sacrificed. And when we talk about marriage in the Bible, almost all of salvation history talks about marriage. That's how God has decided to communicate to us salvation history. It's a marriage. And it culminates in the book of Revelation with the marriage of the wedding feast of the Lamb, with Jesus being the bridegroom. But it goes way back, the very first story of Genesis. It's a marriage, creation of Adam and Eve. And it goes on and on. Moses in Sinai, as he's making a covenant with the Israel people, he uses marriage language. He's betrothing himself to the people. And so marriage is a very beautiful thing because God created it, but also in the language and the beauty that Jesus infuses into it as well. The Catechism says, God who created man out of love also calls him to love, the fundamental and innate vocation of every human being. For man is created in the image and likeness of God, who is himself love. So when it talks about being made in the image and likeness of God, we're made in the likeness of Jesus. Since God created him man and woman, the mutual love becomes an image of the absolute and unfailing love which God loves man. Paragraph 48 says, authentic married love is caught up into divine love, and this love may lead spouses to God, may aid and strengthen them in sublime office of being a father and mother. There's grace from the sacrament. That's what I try to talk with our young couples about. The grace of the sacrament. Yes, it's an exciting day with lots of family, but it's a sacrament and there's grace. And it leads to holiness if you surrender yourself to the grace. I was talking to Dustin beforehand. I've kind of become a disciple of Bishop Robert Barron, mostly because he just puts out so much material. And I have a long drive to work every day, an hour drive back and forth to Chesterfield every day, so I have a lot of time to listen. And Bishop Barron talks about, in one of his presentations, 3 paths to holiness. What are the 3 paths to holiness? He talks about the first path. The first thing you need to do is to find the center. That Christ needs to be the center of your life. All things, all other things rotate around that. Christ is the center. The second thing that he talks about is that know that you are a sinner and in need of forgiveness. And so that speaks to having an image of ourselves as we truly are. We all know, in our conscience, in our hearts, that we're sinners and in need God's forgiveness. No matter how we look on the outside, we all know that. If we have Christ as our center, we all know we fall short of that image. And so we need forgiveness and to recognize that. And the last thing he says is, which is particularly taught in marriage, recognize that your life is not about yourself. So that's something that I think it would be hard to hear in a wider group in our culture. Recognize that our life is not about ourselves. I mean, so many times it's, how do I take care of myself? What am I doing? It's relativism. It's all about me. But to recognize this path of holiness is to recognize that God is not, that your life is not about yourself. So I want to take a minute now, a few minutes actually. We're going to have a little reflection time. We've been kind of reflecting on the document. And so just individually, give yourself a little elbow room. But I really want you just to kind of think for a few minutes on your life. Whether it's your life from when you were a young kid or your married life. But I want you to think about some points of grace in your marriage, in your life, times when you've noticed something, maybe a change or a decision point in your life where you felt God's grace to go a different direction. And so we're just going to take maybe 5 minutes or so, and I just want you to maybe close your eyes or write down some points of grace in your life that you can reflect on. And then after that, we're going to take a couple minutes just to share within your table there, if you're comfortable, just maybe 1 or 2 of those points of grace. How has God acted in your life? All right. So we'll do that for about 5 minutes, then we'll get back together. Okay, so now if we just want to take maybe 5 minutes within your small table group, just to, if you feel comfortable sharing kind of a point of grace in your life, in your marriage, and in your vocation with those at your table. If you don't feel like it, that's okay too. But just take maybe 5 minutes and do some sharing together how God has acted in your life. It's an interesting exercise. We did this in our retreat before our ordination. It's not something that you want us to take an inventory of our entire lives. It was really interesting looking back kind of from the, from as long back as we remember, where did we see God, or where do we see God now that maybe we didn't do then? So I thought it was a nice exercise to do here today too, because God does act in each of our lives, but many times we don't sit back and reflect on that. So even though it's 5 minutes, it'd be nice to share that. So thank you. We'll get back together for a few minutes. Okay. It certainly did with our group as well. We kept going on and on, so that's good. And I think it's important to share those things, not only with each other, but tell stories. How's God acted in your life? Young families, young couples. The more we share, the easier it becomes for us to do that. So I appreciate the exercise. The next thing I want to spend a minute or two talking about is love. What is love? So Gaudium et Spes says that love is an affection of the will, involves the good of the whole person. It goes on to say that love is the free and mutual gift of themselves. And one definition that has really stuck with me is from St. Thomas Aquinas that Bishop Barron has kind of taught me, is to will the good of the other. And so I struggled for a long time, like coming up with something to wrap my head around what love meant. I always felt love. I loved Kristen, I loved my children, I loved my parents. I always knew in my gut what that meant. I wanted what was best for them. I didn't want them to be hurt. I wanted them to be happy. So I wanted all those things. But when this was a simple definition that was easy for me to think about, was to will the good of the other, to will what is best for them, with no strings attached for myself. Purely what is best for them. Not what they can do for me. I love them because what they can do for me. No self-love, but truly what is best for them, to will the good of the other. And so that's the definition that's really helped me, and so I wanted to share that. Christian vocation. So now we're starting to get into action. Christian vocation. Strengthened by grace for holiness of life, the couple will painstakingly cultivate in prayer for steadiness of love, large-heartedness, and the spirit of sacrifice. So we need to pray for steadiness of love, self-giving, and sacrifice, and it's not easy. Young people should be aptly and seasonably instructed in the dignity, duty, and work of marriage. Gaudium et Spes 49. So where do young people get this instruction? How are they supposed to be seasonably instructed? What are your thoughts? Church. the example of their parents. I think that's first and foremost, the example of their parents, the example of all of us here that are married. That's our vocation, to provide an example. It's not easy. Sometimes it's hard. Sometimes we fall short. We never feel like we're doing good enough. If we have done better, regret, all those things. But that's our vocation. How else? So church, the example of their parents. What else? Who else affected? Family and friends, a kind of extended family, right? Grandparents, I think, are huge when it comes to this. Because a lot of times some of the struggles and stress of raising the children are now off to a little degree, although we still worry about our kids and our grandkids. We still pray for them all the time. But I think grandparents truly have a role to play when it comes to being an example for young couples. So Pope Francis says that children that are lovingly corrected feel cared for. I love that. They may not act like it. All right? But I think that is a true statement. Children that are lovingly corrected feel cared for. He says, be aware of indulging children too much. He states it is the family life that children are taught the wise use of freedom. So not overindulging themselves. Freedom is not do any old thing you want. That's not freedom. Freedom is living a life of virtue and restraint. And living a life of virtue is where you'll find happiness. Do any old thing you want. May look kind of like it'd be fun, but I don't think those people are happy. They may be happy for a short time, but it's not a happiness that lasts. So true freedom is a virtue.
Okay, I wanted to share just real quick a point of grace for that exercise, that reflection, just to show that God really works in mysterious ways. So I mentioned earlier that we were not immune to our daughter being pregnant before she got married. And for me, that was an extra, I don't know, felt like a blow to the stomach. Just because I had been praying for 14, 16 years to have a baby. I mean, I honestly believed that I could still, by God's grace, get pregnant. So when I found out that my, 20-something-year-old daughter was pregnant, it was just hard. It was hard. I cried. And yet it was a happy time for her. I mean, she was elated, and I didn't want to spoil that. So she and I had, honestly, just the most honest talk, if you will, and I kind of shared my heart about how it felt. And she shared that she wanted her mom, to be on her side and to be with her on this journey. And it was a moment of grace because from that moment on, I was able to enjoy her whole pregnancy, which I didn't get to be a part of. I mean, I never had for myself. She allowed me to be in the room when she gave birth, so I got to witness that, which, that is the biggest miracle ever. But as I look back, I really had prayed to have a baby for a long time, and we just didn't. But I didn't realize he was going to show up as my grandchild. So, just things that look like they're not supposed to, and it's an act of God. Okay. So Kevin had mentioned that Gaudium et Spes said special urgency. It's under the marriage part is under the heading of special urgency. And I think we all, by raising our hands earlier, saw that special urgency, it's definitely still needed today. When I started doing research on this presentation, I really honestly wasn't expecting the amount of volume of information and surveys and reports and articles and quotes by wise saints. such as St. John Chrysostom. But in many ways, I felt a comfort with it. I mean, I would love to share everything that I learned, but we don't have time for that. I actually believe that this quote kind of sums up the whole talk for the day. The love of husband and wife is the force that welds society together. I think we've lost sight of that. I mean, I have to be honest, I kind of lost sight of that myself until I started kind of doing more research about it. But I do think as a church, as Catholic laity, that there's some work that we can do. So, one thing I've learned in reading Holy Scripture is that context matters. You know, like you shouldn't just take a quote or a scripture verse out of context. So, my goal in this part of the presentation is just, I promise not to bore you with statistics. Kevin's already rolling his eyes, but I do have some statistics that I found. And I think it just helps. I don't think it's anything real earth-shattering necessarily, but I think it just helps to make the case for where we are and that this document still matters today, perhaps more than ever. So, before I get started in statistics, I'm just doing a crash course in history, a little bit of what Kevin already shared, but you know, in the beginning, obviously this is a verse from Genesis that you're all familiar with. God, and I'm starting in the middle here. God created man in his image, and the divine image he created them. Male and female he created them. God blessed them, saying to them, be fertile and multiply, fill the earth and subdue it. I think this means we are all images of God, even the complementarity of our genders. We become the visible signs of God's invisible mystery, the Trinity, which sets the foundation for love and marriage as we know it today. And Saint Pope Paul VI agrees. In paragraph 48, he has this quote. The intimate partnership of married life and love has been established by the Creator and qualified by his laws. For the good of the spouses and their offspring, as well as of society, the existence of a sacred bond no longer depends on human decisions alone, for God himself is the author of matrimony. Again, we have to have God included as the center of our marriages. All right, I told you this was fast, so we're in the New Testament. And one of the books that we've actually used and referenced in our pre-Cana is Good News About Sex and Marriage by Christopher West. And it really has some nice things that we're able to share, but he actually has this quote. Christ came to restore God's original intention of love in the world. This is the good news of the gospel. And I think it remains the good news for us still today. So in Ephesians, St. Paul writes about husbands and wives as an elaborate teaching on Christ and the church. And Kevin read the long portion of this scripture at the beginning from the Wedding Rite book. But I think it bears repeating. For this reason, a man shall leave his father and his mother and be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. This is the great mystery, but I speak in reference to Christ and the church. And I believe that this great mystery that St. Paul references is the marriage, that marriage is an expression of the spousal love of Christ and his church. Okay, so another book, Praying for and with Your Spouse, by Dr. Greg and Lisa Popchak. I know I had like a little marriage radar and doing all of my research, everything just kind of kept popping up at me. But I thought that this quote was especially enlightening. Marriage has the power to reveal all of this because, as Scripture and church teaching make clear, God's own relationship with the church and with each of us in the church is like the relationship between a bridegroom and a bride. I don't think it's a coincidence, and I know Kevin talked about this in more depth, but the language of bridegroom and bride, from the scripture, from the very beginning, the first story to the Revelation and everywhere in between, I don't think God does things by coincidence. I think it's something we really need to pay pay attention to. And it should be inspirational for us to live our lives and marriages with that same amount of self-sacrificing love that Jesus gave to us. Okay, so now we're in present day. And Pope Francis shares, the welfare of the family is decisive for the future of the world and that of the church. Like, the family, it's important. It's important for our society. I really did not understand the gravity of this until I kind of really started doing research, that it is this institution that makes a difference. So, again, this is the same slide, and the same roadblocks, and all the ones that you offered as well. They're not captured here. But I do think it's a visual of how we've lost track of the pure meaning of marriage as God intended. We let our selfish desires overrule the church's definition of marriage. So let's look at some statistics. I'm not even an accounting person, so I don't know why I'm excited about it. Okay, so I did separate this into two. I did a secular search, and then I also did a Catholic search. So we're going to start with the secular. Pew Research Center, which this is a nonpartisan fact tank, did a poll, and this was, 2013. So why get married? I won't read all of this to you, but love, 88% people got married for love, followed by lifelong commitment, that was 81%, and companionship, 76%. I think striking is that having children was only 49%. Maybe a little bit calls for alarm, I'm not sure. But as I love definitions, I actually kind of, in hindsight, said, I wonder what definition of love people responded to when they were answering this. You know, is it the love that we define from the Catholic Church, or is it love from the movies and the TVs and the social media that we might think? So something to ponder. Okay, this was still with Pew Research Center, is that remarriage is increasing. Again, this was in 2013. First marriage for both was 60%, and a remarriage for at least one of the spouses was 40%. I only share this with you just because I think it's something that, as the church, that we should recognize, especially when I know Kevin, meets with different couples or with pre-Cana. Like, we just need to recognize at this moment that that's a fact in our society. Okay, so then another, which I found fascinating, is called the National Marriage Project, and it was in 2012 that they did this study, and it was called The State of Our Unions. And actually, they came up with 10 recommendations to present to leadership in the government to really support marriage, believe it or not. And I thought that this was a quote from a report that just kind of dumbfounded me. Marriage is not merely a private arrangement. It is also a complex social institution. Marriage fosters small cooperative unions, also known as stable families, that enable children to thrive, shore up communities, and help family members to succeed during good times and to weather the bad times. And this came from a secular group. So again, these studies there's so much in them, but I'm sharing the tip-top highlights. This particular statistic, or this graph, the focus was on the middle column, which is moderately educated mothers, and they define that by completed high school but not a 4-year college degree. So in 1982, only 13% of children of moderately educated mothers were born outside of marriage. And about in 2006 to 2008 range, this number increased to 44%. That's a pretty big increase in just a little over 20 years. And then a similar one is So this one was based on 14-year-old girls who were not living with both of their biological parents. In 1982, that was 31%, and 2006 to 2010 span, that rose to 43%. Again, what's the takeaway? Just that less children are living with both biological parents now more than they were 25 years ago. And of course, there's all kinds of caveats, because as an adoptive parent, I'm gonna be like, well, yeah, because we adopted them, we're not the biological parents. So, I mean, I know that there's only so much you can read into these statistics. Also about median age of marriage is, in secular studies, increasing. Women now 27 years old and men 29. But this is also linked to the rise in cohabitation prior to marriage and the dramatic increase in the number of children born outside of marriage. So, I mean, all of this linked together, if you will. So, what does all this mean? From these studies, I think it really points to the success of our future generations. Those born to married, well-educated parents are increasingly likely to have the same advantages when they become adults. But those born to fragmented families are increasingly likely to repeat their parents' patterns and to establish and to experience the heartache, hardship, and risk that result. So all of this, I don't want to get into even all the education, I'm not sure that stuff matters. I just think that it was really, I thought it was profound, honestly, that a secular study was seeing the benefits of stable families for our communities, and enough to do a report and actually want our government to do something about it. I have no idea if anything happened, but. So, then I went and did some research into Catholic studies. And on the USCCB, United States Conference of Catholic Bishops website, they have statistics as current as 2014. There were 151,000 marriages in the U.S. in 2014, but I do know that last year in 2017, there were 148,000 marriages in the U.S. So it's steady. I mean, there's a few less, but then the USCCB did this report, and in their survey, they did a report on just, I'll say, marital status. So about 54% of adult Catholics are currently married, about 28% have never been married, 9% are divorced, 6 are widowed, and 3 are separated. And interestingly, the average age of the first marriage for Catholics is 24, a little bit less than the secular study. This is a, that's supposed to say -1. This is just based on parents. So 79% of Catholic parents are married, 13% of Catholic parents are single living with a partner, 4% are divorced, 3% are single, and 1% of parents are separated, and -1 of Catholic parents are widowed. So just a little bit of a snapshot, and again, this is 2014. I promise I'm getting to a point.
What's the point of parent? In other words, those widow people, they're 80 years old. They might have been parents 20 years ago.
Yes.
But it's still counted as parent even though they don't have small children?
Correct. I think so. He's in this survey. Yes.
What's the question?
I'm sorry?
What's the question?
What defines a parent?
Does the parent only mean people with children at home, or does it mean anyone who's never had a child?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know the answer to it, to be honest with you. I took it as any point, but you know what? If it's young children, it might be like children 18 or under or something. Good question. Okay, so Catholic parents, 60% say it's very important. So I think this is one of those ranges, you know, how important, very, lukewarm, not important at all. Think it's very important for children to celebrate their first communion. And only 61% say it's very important that they be confirmed. Now, I think it's I'm not sure why that number is even different. But there's a note in this report that says the divide between parents expressing importance from those expressing less importance is the frequency of mass attendance. And that, I really think, is kind of crucial. And this one gets into 22% of Catholic parents attend Mass weekly, and 53% of Catholic parents attend Mass at least once a month. I think that, I was surprised at this. I don't, again, this is 2014, so maybe that's increased. I don't know. My reaction to all of this is we need to get Catholic families back to Mass. And then, I think this is the last one. There was, again, huge, thick report, but it's called CARA, C-A-R-A. It's the Center for Applied Research in the Apostolate. So the USCCB, and this dates back to 2007, looked to CARA for, they wanted to find out how couples allow their marriages to be informed by their faith. And this has actually resulted in a website that the USCCB offers, and it was a whole initiative that they were doing on marriage. This graph just shows how the habits of prayer and reading other religious or spiritual materials. So the good news is that prayer, which is the line that goes up on the right-hand side, daily, 43% engage in prayer. On the other hand, it's kind of opposite that on a daily, not as many people read religious or other spiritual materials. And that could be reading. There's audio, there's videos, there's other ways to intake or attend conferences and events, but this is kind of pointing to, do we have enough prayer? Are we prayer warriors with our families? So, back to the frequent Mass attendance. More frequent Mass attendees are also more likely to say the following statements very closely reflect their understanding of the marriage sacrament. The sacrament of marriage extends beyond the wedding day. Married love helps the couples care for others beyond their family. Married love brings the husband and wife closer together and therefore closer to God. Children bring the husband and wife closer together and therefore closer to God. Married love reveals God, and married love is imperfect yet holy. So that's not surprising, but for those who go to Mass and see marriage as a sacrament and believe that God is part of their marriage, I think that's why it's reflected on these. So there's a strong relationship between frequency of Mass attendance and various aspects of marital status. Okay, I love quotes if you can't tell. And I particularly like this one by Dr. Greg and Lisa Popchak. Married couples can be beacons shining from the windows of their homes, reminding aching hearts that the love they long for is real. I think that's something maybe we need to soak in. I don't always think of us as being a role model or just because we're married. I don't know, it's just one of those things, but going through all of this, I feel like maybe we should look at it differently and take it more seriously. So I'll share a little bit about our daughter and son-in-law. So I've mentioned, we have the baby early. They lived together prior to getting married. They had our grandson. The pregnancy forced our now son-in-law to end his college career and start working, which is normal. He's taking care of his family, but he works hard. And our daughter finished with her dental assistant certificate like days before she gave birth. None of this was easy for us to swallow as a parent, but we worked through it. Never stopped loving them. We didn't necessarily go over and visit them at their apartment, but never stopped loving them. So, and then I shared with you about the infertility and how that brought me and my daughter closer together and was a healing for my own infertility. They were married in the Catholic Church on September 3rd, 2016. and they now have a second child. So they celebrated their second anniversary a few months ago. But they're also struggling. The word divorce has been communicated at least once between them. Our son-in-law has a chronic condition that I don't think he's accepted. Our daughter is home with both children all day. They have financial worries. And they don't attend mass regularly. I'm not even sure they go unless we're around and ask them to go. So, ironic or not, I kind of be like, do you guys know what we talk about? Like, we talk about marriage all the time, you know? And I want to solve it. I'm a mom. I want to protect my kids. I want them to understand. I want them to see what marriage can be like, and that it's not easy. And I want God to be a part of their marriage. But I also know that that's Holy Spirit. That's His work. And I pray. I send her prayers all the time. I want to send her book. I want to send her the whole stack of research that I have. She won't read that. So Kevin and I, this is very real for us. I would love to leave here today and just think like, okay, if we could just, capture, and I could send them something as a video, maybe that would help, because they're not readers. They're not going to read a book. They're not going to read an article that I send. So if you're prayer warriors and you want to add Liz and Taylor Eubanks to your prayer list, I would much appreciate it. Okay, I know. I got 5 minutes here. Okay. Let's wrap it up.
So in the final paragraph, Gaudium et Spes says that parents or guardians should by prudent advice provide guidance to their young with respect to founding a family, and the young ought to listen gladly. But I think the first part of that is valid too, that as parents we need to be able and be willing to offer prudent advice. I think we talked about earlier some of the things that we can do, that we can be examples to them. But we also need to be willing to provide advice, whether they seem to be interested in it or not. Most of the time they'll at least listen. They may not accept it then, but maybe you're planting a seed. And so that is part of our vocation as parents, provide prudent advice and guidance. All those, therefore, who exercise influence over communities and social groups should work efficiently for the welfare of marriage and the family, and that's why we're here doing this talk to you. Because all of you, as a Christian community, we all need to work for healthy and happy marriages. This has been on Pope Francis's heart as well. Right now, the youth synod is going on, and one of the reports that I was listening to, I think it was EWTN, maybe one of the reporters was interviewing young people and talking about young people that were attending the synod, and they were talking about prayer, and that one of the things that came up in the discussion with the youth is that they wanted someone, or they lacked someone to mentor them in how to pray. So they don't know what to do. Some of them, and some of our families have been very good in teaching our youth how to pray. I think maybe for my parents' generation, there was a much more focused, outlined prayer life, whether it was going to benediction or praying the Angelus, and there were things, there was a schedule. This is what we did. This is how a lot of our families rotated around these things. And then I think a lot for my parents' generation, life got crazy and that kind of dropped off. And even for myself, being mentored in prayer, I think was something that maybe was lacking for me. I think I saw some of it, but that was interesting that that's coming out of the synod, that the youth are saying that they want to be mentored in prayer. They don't know how to do it. Another thing that Pope Francis has been recently talking about in a meeting as early as September 7th, so just last month. So he stressed the need for ongoing formation of couples before and after marriage, saying that even the basic teachings of the church, could not be taken for granted. So what are the basic teachings of the church? Our young couples that are getting married and are there for formation, they don't know the basic teachings of the church, and I can vouch for that. I mean, in my 5-year career of doing pre-Cana, they don't know what the church teaches on these things. Basic, and what they do know, they're usually wrong. You know, their understanding is totally wrong. And so, what Pope Francis wanted to do is he renewed his call for a permanent catechumenate for the sacrament of marriage. A permanent catechumenate for the sacrament of marriage, saying it was essential for couples to receive ongoing formation both before and after their wedding. Francis had previously insisted on the need for better, longer, more comprehensive instruction for couples in his annual addresses to the Roman Rota, which is kind of their Supreme Court. The greater effectiveness of pastoral care is realized where the accompaniment does not end with the celebration of the wedding, but escorts them at least for the first years of married life, the Pope said. Francis told the attendees that marriage was a vast, complex, and delicate apostolic field which required the full energy and enthusiasm of the church. The Pope said the aim was for these efforts was to address the urgent need for comprehensive marriage formation. Marriage isn't just not a social event, but a true sacrament that involves an adequate preparation and a conscious celebration, the Pope said. The marriage bond is in fact requires an engaged choice on the part of the engaged couple, which focuses on the will to build together something that must never be betrayed or abandoned. So in conclusion, as we're wrapping up here, what we wanted to do is kind of present to you the beauty of marriage, the beauty of the church's teaching of marriage based on Christ's relationship to the bridegroom. Then go into kind of where we're at. But more than anything is begin to have you start thinking, when this is over, or now, or whenever, what could I be doing in my own parish? Well, what can I be doing in my own family, first of all? What can I be doing in my own parish? And what can we be doing together? So Gaudium et Spes says their marching orders says that various organizations, especially family associations, should try by their programs of instruction and action to strengthen young people and spouses themselves, particularly those recently wed, and to train them for family, social, and apostolic life.
So we have a bullet list of some different tactics. This is not inclusive, and I would love if we had time, if we don't, to brainstorm together. But as Kevin said, and what Pope Francis believes, which I find very encouraging, you know, we need to be the voice, those in this room, and we need to be the voice for marriage and family, just as for the voice for the unborn. I think it has that same level of need, but it's not out there. So that, you know, in my opinion, we can be very lazy or stale about our marriage unless something goes wrong. Like, if something goes wrong, then that's when you kind of start to seek help. But the truth is, like, until we were part of the Diaconate Formation Program, we coasted. I don't know how else to say it. It was, I mean, there were intentional times, but never once did I think we had to continually develop our marriage. And I see that so clearly today. We have some time that we spend on marriage preparation, but zero at the moment that I believe in terms of marriage maintenance or marriage life, you know, extending that. So I think that we need to be more proactive with that and supportive of marriages. Be a support system and even help change the perception of, like, once you get married, you don't have to do anything else. Because I think that's wrong. So we talked about, you know, celebrating anniversaries, just like we did this morning at the very beginning. Attending Mass together, spending Sunday together, which is the day of rest, together and with your family. Praying together as a couple and a family. This is brand new. Kevin and I did not do this up until we started the formation program. And we're not even experts in it yet, but it's holy. It's just grace-filled. Consider a family rosary, or focus on teaching our children how to pray. reading scripture stories together at bedtime, celebrating other sacraments together like reconciliation, participate in adult formations such as a Bible study together or any kind of formation, start or attend a small group for couples such as Teens of Our Lady, which Holy Childhood in Muscuda I know has this program, and that was the first time I've ever heard of it. Attend a marriage encounter. Again, the list can go on and on, but I do think that we need to, as Catholic lay people, take this seriously, and maybe, you know, if God's calling you, maybe there's something that you can do at your parish to wake this up or to make this come alive, or, you know, to help those married couples stay married. So, now we have 30 seconds. What ideas do you have? I'm sure that you guys have great ideas, actually, but I do want to be respectful of the fact that it's around bad time. So I don't know if it's something, I don't know how this program works, or if there's some, you know, at lunch, if you want to talk amongst yourselves at your tables or with others, or if there's anything that you're doing at a parish that's really working. I heard one of a parish in our local area had somebody, just a layperson, would send letters to those newly married in the church, like, congratulations, and what are you going to do? And we'd like you to be active, and we can't wait to see you at Mass. I mean, it's very simple, but I don't know if it's how powerful it is, but it feels like it could be a very inviting something to do. The bottom line, I think, is that we can all be the joy and hope for marriage today, marriage and families today, in our own families as well as in our parishes. Okay.